I'm Jean Nolte, editor at Fonz & Porter.
And I'm Colleen Tauke. I'm the sewing specialist at Fonz & Porter. In this tutorial, we'll show you how to create the rag quilt called Little Ark.
To get the pattern for this quilt, go to fonzandporter.com/quiltingquickly. This quilt is flannel, which is great for a rag quilt. And we start with 5-inch strips. And the first thing you're going to do, and your pattern will tell you the exact sizes, is cut the long rectangles and the shorter rectangles, and then some 5-inch squares. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is work with these. Now we've also cut batting pieces that are smaller, but the same thing, long rectangles, medium rectangles, and some squares.
And they are smaller, so when you go to cut, remember not 5-inch, but they're about ½ an inch or an inch shorter, or smaller in each direction.
And here's why.
We'll
You're going to get 2 matching pieces, and you're going to put the first one wrong side up and center the batting right on that, and then put the other one right on top.
You're making a quilt sandwich, and you're going to be doing that then through all the different shapes you've cut for this quilt.
So now we're going to stitch that.
And because the batting is, it makes the fabric kind of ride back and forth, we have switched our sewing machine to a walking foot. A lot of times you think, well, we can get by without a walking foot, but if you actually use one, you'll realize it's a great tool.
If you have it, you should use it in this case.
Exactly.
So we're going to actually stitch lines here about 1.5 inches in from the edge, and Colleen has put a piece of tape on her machine there so she can just run the edge of the fabric along there.
Back up just a little bit here, hold on. I need to start from the beginning, from the edge. And what I'm going to be doing is actually putting in the quilt lines. We're going to make a quilt sandwich out of these pieces with the batting in the center. Now,
so you're going to sew all 4 sides like that. Now, Colleen is sewing with black thread so it'll show up. You might not want to do that.
Probably not. If I were making this as a gift, I would use a coordinating thread. In this sample here, we're just going to do straight stitching because it's a little quicker, but you could get into those great decorative stitches in your sewing machine that you haven't used possibly.
Right.
Test out something, find something fun, and do a decorative stitch across it, and we'll show you an example of that in just a moment. But you'll see what we're doing here is just making kind of a hash mark across this. It holds the batting in place for this quilt, and then we'll make the process of creating this quilt go really quickly.
So once you've got all 4 sides sewn like that, you've actually got your quilting done for that section of the quilt.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to trim my threads here, and Jean has a sample there of a decorative stitch.
So you can see this one, we used a serpentine stitch, the same thing. It's about 1.5 inches away from the edge of the piece, but it's just a little fancier.
Yeah, it's a fun
And in
stitch.
a coordinating color. This happens to be blue. You could use any color you like. So now we're ready. Once you've made 4 of these, you're ready to join them into a 4-patch.
You can see in the quilt, you can see that there's 4 of those 5-inch squares that are put together in a 4-patch. That's an easy construction method that we're used to.
Right. And again, you're going to see they're the same on the front and the back. So it doesn't matter which way you put them together.
Correct.
Either way is right sides together.
Now, this is where you have to stop. If you're a quilter, you're used to making a 1/4 inch seam. You need to make 1/2 inch seams. You have to have something that you can cut into that will make the rag. So at this point, be thinking 1/2 inch seam, 1/2 inch seam. And when you're looking at it, you're thinking, oh, those are so wide. I'm so used to making a 1/4 inch seam, but
you need that for later down the road.
The fun part of this quilt.
All right,
so that's what it looks like, 1/2 inch seam across. You're going to want to open up the seams like this, just so you know what the back looks like. There's where we're headed.
Right, so the seam is on the front of the quilt, which is different. This is the right side. So you've got two patches, and we're going to join those with the wrong sides together, which is the side without any seams.
The flat side.
Right.
And here's where you may want to come in and just put in a simple pin matching up your seams across. It's not vital because it's a rag quilt. It's not as precise as our normal quilting. This is where we kind of kind of take a break from all that precision quilting and piecing.
If everything doesn't line up exactly right on this one, it'll never be noticeable when it's finished.
Okay, so 1/2 inch seam again. With the seam allowances open, making sure as you approach them that everything stays nice and flat across there. Take my pin out as I approach.
It's a little bit thick when you go through those seams, so you probably want to slow down a little bit.
Take your time getting through there. Oops, and it got hung up a little bit. There we go. See, this is where that walking foot just helps take things through more.
You want to sew all the way to the end.
All the way to the end. You don't have to worry about back stitching or anything like that because you're going to run over these seams as you come come back. See how those are open?
So there we go. That's the 4 patch. That's part of the middle. So you're going to make this quilt in 4 quadrants. So you have a 4 patch. Then you take
the medium-sized rectangles.
2 of those, and they're going to be joined on your 4 patch. And then once that's joined, you have 3 long rectangles.
The process seems kind of chunky, and there's all these seam allowances, and at first you think, am I even doing this right? Because I remember the first time I made one of these, and it is. So then you get into the fun part.
So once you've joined all of that into a quadrant, you make 3 more of those.
And then you can see how they
join all of them together to make the quilt top. So we're going to just show you the final step on just this little piece of cutting.
It gets kind of big, and you might want to make sure that your vacuum sweeper is ready because it gets a little bit messy. Some of the pieces get kind of crumbly. But what we're going to do is that we're using a special scissors that's produced for rag quilts, so you'll see that they're kind of a rounded tip instead of having a real exact point, and it won't cut into the seam allowance. It'll allow you to go in but not cut all the way through. And so what we're going to do is just clip through. And this is the part that at first seems like, what am I doing to what I just created? But you're just going to follow along every one of the seam allowances and snip them anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 inch into segments all along.
Depends on what you like. It needs to be a little bit skinnier, really. It makes it a little raggy.
Yeah. And the tactile part is the fun part of this quilt. The kids are so attracted to. It's kind of a touchy-feely quilt.
Right.
So you're going to do that process on all the seams.
It's going to take a little while.
The hard part is finding a path so that you don't forget a seam throughout.
So there
and
you
then
can
they get
see
roughed up when you wash the quilt.
Right. So what you're going to do once you get everything cut is actually wash and dry this quilt in the washer and dryer. And you're going to want to watch. It will put off a lot of lint. So you want to clean the lint trap in your dryer maybe every 10 minutes or so as you're doing that. And there are some tips in the pattern for that.
This quilt also has binding on the outside edge. Sometimes in the past we've also used the rag edge method for the outer edge, but on a children's quilt, for safety's sake, we would rather you put binding on the outer edge. Kids sometimes like to chew on the outside edge of a quilt. We don't want them eating the quilt.
It's a little safer, yeah.
Right. So thanks for joining us today.
To see more of our video tutorials, go to our website.